Welcome to another episode of Digital Media Church. My name is Matt Williams. I'm your host. And on this podcast, we have conversations about how can church leaders use digital media to live into and live out the Great Commission in the digital space. Because it's 2025. Jesus calls us to go to make disciples of all nations. And in 2025, we all know that people spend a ton of time in the digital world. So the digital world is one of those nations. And we have conversations with people all over the place in all different areas of ministry about how, as church leaders and ministry leaders, we might be able to do that well. And for this episode, I'm super excited because we have Justin Trapp who is joining us. Justin has started multiple businesses. He has led churches, and it's going to be a really good conversation where we're going to think about digital media as a whole and then also really dive in podcasting. So Justin, thank you for being here. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Matt. Are you by chance related to the third baseman from the San Francisco Giants?
I am not. It's a good name. I was a baseball player, so I used to say maybe that's a good sign, and I have his bobblehead somewhere. But no, I did. Unfortunately, that name did not get me as far as it got him.
There you go, the great Matt Williams.
Yes, absolutely. So, Justin, let's start with you, just to introduce our listeners to who you are, your background. So, just tell us about your background in ministry and digital media, and then what you're up to now.
Yeah, so I grew up wanting to be in ministry, as weird as that sounds. When I was 11 years old, I went to my first youth camp. I had my first experience there. The DC Talk album, Free at Last, like this is really going to date me. DC Talk Free at Last was like the big album that week. And I had an experience with the Lord during the altar time one night. Wow. And I felt like God called me into ministry. I had a few people encouraged me in that route. And when I got back to my dorm room, I left my Bible on my bed and I just opened up. I was like, Lord, speak to me. This was such an incredible night. And I saw John 9:4, which is, we must work while it is day. Night comes when no one can work. And I felt like that was just the Lord saying to me, like, hey, there's work to be done. And so that was like a Thursday night. We get to my church, my home church, my pastor preached on John 9:4 that weekend. And so I asked my mom what had happened and when I felt like God had spoke to me. And so I almost immediately began to work towards ministry. And I got my first ministry job, like full-time vocational ministry, when I was 19 years old. And I was in way over my head. I got the junior high position at a large mega church. Why they hired me, I still to this day don't know. And 10 months later, they were letting me go. And the pastor was like, hey, listen, you've done nothing wrong. You have a lot of promise, but it is clear to me, the pastor said this, that you are not a leader yet. You think and behave like an intern, which is really great if we wanted an intern, but we need a leader. And I think I can get you there. But my fear is that you could hate me. I'm okay with that. But my fear is that you will hate ministry in a few years. And I don't know if I can accept that. And so I'd rather do it now and let you grow on your own than for us to just beat you down for the next 2 years to get you up to the pace that we need you to get up to. Because the church head was exploding. And again, I was over my head. So yeah. Got hired, got let go in 10 months. And, but I will say that began this process of, not just wanting to be in ministry, but learning how to be a leader and investing myself in leadership. So that's sort of the beginning story. I'll fast forward years later. I had, what was on the ministry vocational career path, if you will, junior high pastor, high school pastor, student ministries director, associate pastor, executive pastor. I just never felt like God tapped me on the shoulder to plant a church or to lead a church. I was interim pastor at one time and we didn't have kids. And I remember my wife told me she was pregnant. We'd been married 8 years. My wife told me she was pregnant on Good Friday. And she scheduled her first ultrasound appointment. The problem was I was going to be out of the country. I was going to be halfway around the world. I was in Madagascar at the time of her ultrasound appointment. And luckily, I had Wi-Fi. And so I was able to FaceTime my wife during her ultrasound appointment. And I heard my son's heartbeat from Madagascar. And for whatever reason, Matt, I just began to think about this idea that I had to serve pastors so I could be around ministry, but I wasn't a pastor in full-time vocational ministry. And for whatever reason, I got off that FaceTime call and I had this urgency. You got to do this and you got to do it now. So this is in April, early May, and we launched Ministry Pass October 7th, 2014. So just like 6 months later. And
Wow.
we've been doing that for the past 11 years.
Wow. Well, first of all, I just want to mention that I'm sure it was painful at the time, but what struck me about the story with your first job is the pastor was like, you can hate me, but I don't want you to hate ministry.
Yeah.
I just thought that was beautiful and just wanted to mention that for what it's worth, even though I know it was painful. And then that's a quick turnaround, 6 months from idea to launch. What is Ministry Pass for anybody that's not familiar with it?
Yeah, Ministry Pass is a sermon prep platform. So we create sermon series. We have a library of sermon series content that pastors and churches can get a membership and they have access to our library. And I will say this, we're not writing sermons for anybody. What we're doing is we're creating the frameworks, giving pastors the research materials on a particular topic or the passage, and then they can sort of take that and run with that through their own unique preaching voice and style and experience, if you will. And then it also comes with the media assets as well for the screens and social media and all of that. Last time we did the math, Matt, we had calculated that we had around like over 130 years worth of Sunday content on Ministry.
Oh, wow.
So it's a tremendous library. It's been a lot of fun. And of course, I love what we get to do because I get to be around pastors, get to be around ministry, but I'm not necessarily full-time vocationally myself anymore.
Absolutely. And then I also, from your bio, saw that you also started Sermonary. So what is Sermonary? Tell us about that.
Sermonary is a sermon writing app. So if Word and Evernote and Google Docs, those were all created to just be basic word processors that have 10,000 features that have nothing to do with a sermon. We created Sermonary to be a drag and drop intuitive sermon builder that then pastors can not only write, but they can also present their sermon, the message using something called podium mode, which has like a timer at the top and they can scroll through it. It's a beautiful experience if you like preaching from an iPad.
That's really cool. I love that you started that you got an entrepreneurial bug. I feel like we are similar kindred spirits in that you can do ministry and start new things at the same time. And that's really cool. I want to dive into some podcasting questions that I have for you, podcasting as church leaders, as churches. But first, like just kind of a general question. So since 2014, you've been creating digital resources to serve church leaders, to serve pastors. Is there anything that pops up top of mind that you've learned, like generally, thematically speaking, about how digital media can make a difference for churches and for church leaders?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll say this: every Sunday, 99.9% of the worship leaders in the United States get up and they will sing other people's songs that other people have written or have published. So churches aren't writing original songs every week. Although if a church does a worship band does write an original song, that's pretty cool. I love that. I think that's amazing. But pastors, on the other hand, are writing these unique sermons every single week. They're preaching over 40 times a year. They are spending more time in sermon prep than they are eating meals with their family every week, which is about 10 and a half hours. And nowhere else in our society do we have a group of people quite like pastors, where you're essentially preparing and presenting what is a college term paper on a topic or a theology, a spiritual topic, a cultural topic, and you're doing that over 40 times a year, and you also have all of your other responsibilities. I don't think pastors realize, and people don't realize, the toll that it takes on a pastor's body, on their mind, their heart. It's just exhausting work. And so what we wanted to do starting back in 2014 is come alongside pastors and not give them sermon transcripts of other pastors, but to give them the materials that they can sort of build upon so that they can save some of that time. They're not starting from a blank page. They're not starting from square one every single week. And if they're able to plan out and be a little bit more organized in their planning, the relief that they could experience just from that, I mean, writing a sermon, you've probably experienced this, Matt, every Monday morning, especially if you're preaching regularly. Every Monday morning is like,
here we go again.
Starts all over again. Preaching is a solo sport. It's a rinse and repeat cycle. And so what we've tried to do is help pastors redeem some of that time, help them be more efficient in the sermon prep side, but also more effective as communicators. And I guess to answer your question, I think pastors really spiritualize content more than we thought when we first started.
Yeah. That's that's cool. And I'm not a weekly preacher, but we'll teach workshops and give talks, and all I know is after doing one talk a month, I'm tired. I can't imagine the weekly grind, that, for lack of a better term, that it is. So that's a nice segue, because where that leads me is, I know we were talking before we hit record about podcasting, but so pastors are putting all of this effort into a message, into words that matter, that can help people find and follow Jesus, live out their faith, advance God's kingdom here on earth. And what they want, the heart's desires, for that to reach and impact as many people as possible. But there's also, like, you preach on Sunday, and then you're on to the next one. So what happens with that sermon? What happens with all of that labor and all of that effort? So that leads us to podcasting. So first question, just to get us started here, is pretty open-ended, but why do you think, how should churches think about podcasting, and why does podcasting matter for a church or for a church leader?
I'll say this, Matt. I believe that today, December 15th, 2025, I still believe that the sermon is the most underutilized piece of content a church has. Because it's such, like we just talked about it, right? Pastors spend all this time. It's such a dense piece of work. And then it's preached and it's heard on Sunday, and then it sort of disappears. And some of the churches have solutions they're using, like sermon clips or sermon shots, which are great, right? That helps extend the life of the sermon. But I think podcasting in particular can be really, really helpful. And I think one of the reasons why it matters is because it can help extend the message beyond the pulpit, right? Podcasting helps churches reach people during the week, on a commute, walking through a park, running an errand, or waking up. And the first thing that they do is they start their podcast in the morning as they take a shower, getting ready for work. If your church has a podcast, or if your pastor has a podcast, it would be amazing if they were tuning into that versus, just some random, news podcast or true crime, if you will, starting their day. And the other thing too, I'll say, Matt, is that podcasting can help a church build depth, not just reach. So social media is about quick impressions, reach. Podcasts, and I know there's sort of codependent relationship here, podcasting and social media, but podcasts create sustained attention over a long period of time, which ultimately forms a deeper relationship or a deeper connection between the host and the listener.
Absolutely. So with when a church leader is thinking about, okay, so I have a sermon, I capture it, and I want to turn it into a podcast, like, how should they think about that? Is it just take what's preached and then publish it on a platform? Do you think about packaging some stuff before and after it? Like, how could a church leader start thinking about, A, I want to get this out there, but B, like, what's going to help this stand out in the noise? Because there's a million podcasts out there. Most of them never get beyond 10 episodes. So on the one hand, it's noisy and saturated. On the other hand, it's still a huge opportunity. So how should a church or a church leader be thinking about, is it just the sermon only? Do you put some packaging around it? Like, what would you say to a pastor asking you that? So
I think just starting out, basics of church podcasting, I think a church should repurpose the sermon. And you should use solutions like sermon shots. Sermonary has a multiply feature in there. So the pastor writes a sermon, then it creates all different pieces of content based on that material. But you could create quotes, scripture graphics, video snippets. I think a church should, back to my point, the sermon is still the most underutilized piece of content. So a church should have that. And a church, in my opinion, shouldn't just upload a copy of the sermon and call it a day, right? Oh man, we have a podcast. I think there's so much more that a church and really a pastor could do specifically beyond just sermon highlights. Because here's the thing. A podcast allows a pastor. So let's just take the sermon aside. A podcast could allow a pastor to explore nuance about the topic, discuss real life issues, build trust. It could show the human side of their leadership. You could show behind the scenes episodes. You could film team discussions that help listeners connect with those spiritual topics or the content. A pastor could use a podcast to talk about faith in everyday life, parenting, leadership, doubt, culture. Every pastor has a different perspective, right? And a different life experiences. So they won't all look the same. But I also think that your church could highlight stories from people that within the community or partner organizations that show ministry happening, ministry in motion. So I think there's a lot of angles. I think the default for churches is, hey, let's upload the sermon. And then the next iteration of that was like, let's use things like Sherman Shots and Sermonary and all these other platforms to create more pieces of content around the sermon. But I actually believe it would be far more beneficial for pastors to do a podcast about theology or about a particular topic, or maybe they've been married 40 years and their marriage is really great and they've counseled hundreds of couples. Like, to me, there's so much wealth and wisdom in their shared experience. And so pastor and spouse could do a podcast together about marriage. And it doesn't have to be a forever podcast. Maybe it's a season where it has 10 episodes or 12 episodes. Yep. Like, really, podcasting is your oyster, right? You can make it what you want. There's a lot of the things to do, but all that to say, your podcast doesn't have to be another sermon. It can be a space for stories, for reflection, or an honest conversation about about the issues that people face. And so, it's a wide open space.
Absolutely, it brings to mind. Where I go to church, I serve and worship at a church in Kansas City, and our pastor, his name's Adam Hamilton, and he preaches on the long side. He's a solid 30 to 35 minutes every week, but even with that, it seems like every week he's talking about how there's stuff that he just had to cut for time, and so that's another thought that popped into mind as you were talking is, it's the cutting room floor.
Oh, yeah.
So to speak, of I wanted to do more of this, but I didn't have time, or this one didn't make the cut, or I was going to do 4 weeks and now I'm doing 3, and here's that fourth one. It seems like it'd be a great way to build, like you said earlier, more depth of relationship as a pastor or a church leader, because it's one to many. You can record, you can publish, and then it can reach people that your calendar will never allow you to reach.
Yeah. I completely agree. It could be people that have been to your church once. Think about this. Think about the trust building that happens because here's the deal. Someone will come to your church and they'll be in and out, and they had some greeters talk to them and you say hi to them. They came, they heard the pastor for 35 minutes and then they leave. How much time how many Sundays would they have to commit to attending before trust and comfort starts to happen to where they're not skeptical. They feel like they know the pastor. But if a pastor had a podcast, if they were talking about real life issues and it wasn't just a sermon, I think that trust building can happen over a week versus 7 months. And so I think that's the real magic in podcasts, is just that deeper connection between the host and the listener.
So I want to get into some practical tools, setups, software, all of that kind of stuff. But before we go there, I'm anticipating a potential question, and I know because I've heard it from church leaders and pastors thinking about social media and other forms of digital media. They're like, okay, this all sounds great, but I don't have an audio producer. I don't have a video editor. I don't have time to like manuscript or write another sermon. So I'm just going to make a statement and want you to respond to it that podcasting, it needs to be polished because we want to be professional in the same way that you would show up to a conversation over coffee with the congregant, but it doesn't have to be perfect or overly produced. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, most of the viral videos that we see in society are not very produced, right? There are moments that happen there, and there's different types of podcast formats as well. Like, excuse me, there are different types of podcast formats as well. My show is really like a 2 to 5 minute episode. It's highly produced. But it's just 2 to 5 minutes. And really my goal, I have a singular goal. I want to encourage and inspire ministry leaders when they hear it. I'm going to share, it's narrative driven. It's highlighting stories of other churches or other pastors doing incredible things for the Lord. And I want to showcase that. And I want to do it in a way that is edifying to the body. And so that's really my format. I like that format because I like to listen to podcasts that are like that. I love the Joe Pomp show from Joe Pompliano. It's a narrative-driven story in the sports world. His are usually 5 to like 13 minutes, so I've cut mine down. But also back to your point about the production value is you could do a show where it's just you guys talking. Right. Mm-hmm. And you have a co-host and you're not trying to carry the whole thing by yourself. I carry it all by myself. So it's just me. I'm the only one talking. So that's why I want mine real crisp. But if I were going to do a show, it's going to be three bros hanging out talking about ministry. Nathan Finocchio is a great example. Like him and his brother and his buddies will get together and they'll play Fortnite while talking about theology. And wow. It's literally them recording themselves hanging out, talking about theology while playing Fortnite. It's so like you could do whatever format you want. There's all different types. And like Finocchio, that's very low production value, right? That's just set up a camera, press record, and we just hang. And it is what it is at that point. Yeah. Mine is I write a script, we have B-roll, we do all the things. So like it could be anything in between those two extremes.
Absolutely. What's your podcast called?
Ministry Minute.
Ministry Minute. I love that. And I think and we'll link to that in the show notes, but another thing that came to mind as you were talking is what's beautiful about podcasting is you said it's like your oyster. It can match the personality and the preferences of the pastor or the ministry leader. You like a 2 to 5 minute narrative based polished version? Great. Yeah. Their Ministry Minute is the way to go. Then on the other end of the spectrum, because I pop in from time to time depending on the guest, but then there's Joe Rogan, the biggest podcast on the planet. It's a 3.5 hour, like wide ranging conversation. And I don't listen to it 3.5 hours in a row, but if it's good enough, I'll listen to it on the drive to work. I'll listen to it on the drive home. I'll pick back up the next day. And so you just have this huge spectrum of flexibility and opportunity so that a pastor can live into what feels good for them and not feel confined to something, because there's successful podcasts all over the map in terms of format, length, all of that stuff.
No, I completely agree. It really, you got to make it your own. I'll say this personal anecdote. My team has wanted me to be more out front. Like, hey, you got to do a podcast. And for years, I didn't want to, because although I've led our team, we've created all this sermon series content, I haven't preached in several years. And they would want me to do like, hey, can you create a video like six preaching tips? And I just got to the point, guys, where I was like, hey, listen, I haven't preached in several years. Like, find somebody else to do this content. Like, I think pastors, this would be great for pastors, but I'm not the one to carry this content. And so I sort of repelled against anything, them wanting me to do a podcast. It wasn't until they were just like, hey, you got to do it. And so I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it completely my way. And so I just started thinking through like, what types of podcasts do I like? I would listen to Rogan, but it's only when there's a guest that I really care about. Right. So, and a lot of times I don't even listen to the whole episode because 3.5 hours is a lot.
Yeah.
I like the Joe Pomp show. It's 8 minutes on the Raiders' new stadium and the suites and the business side of like building a stadium. Like it's just right. The business and sports overlap. The pimento cheese sandwiches at the Masters, why they only cost $1.20 and they have for the past 20 years. It's just weird stuff like that. Right. I just find that kind of interesting. And so I thought, okay, I like that. I like that, style. I like that format. I have I listen to the Daily Wires. It's called the Morning Wire. It's just a few, 2 or 3 stories, and there's not really much commentary. It's just like, hey, here's what happened and here's the reaction and blah, blah, blah. So I wanted to do something like that. And that's what gave me the idea for the Ministry Minute. And I got to be honest, the Ministry Minute's doing fine. It's not like going viral or anything like that. But because I did it my way, and I did it in a way, like I have a singular objective. I'm doing it the way that I want. I'm producing it the way I want. I have lots of control. I don't really care if it goes viral or not. I'm actually having a lot of fun doing it. And so for me, like we're what episode? I'm only 28 episodes in, 29 episodes in, but I've had a tremendous amount of fun. We probably already got 45 in the can. And so I'm batch recording like 10 at a time. And it's been a lot of fun. And I found the lane for me to do it in a way that makes sense, that feels true, and that is fun. And I think that is really important because a lot of times pastors will take a look at other churches or other podcasts and it's like, well, you have Craig Rochelle's leadership podcast. Andy Stanley had a leadership podcast. So I guess if I'm going to do a podcast, it's got to be about leadership. And there's just so many other ways to do a podcast. And to be honest, I think pastors should be doing podcasting a lot more. I mean, here's something that's crazy. To me, this is upside down, Matt. There are far more pastors than politicians and political commentators. Yet there are exponentially more political podcasts. Like take out a church podcast, like just uploading the sermon. That doesn't count. Like you're not allowed to call that a podcast anymore. That's just like the audio version of the sermon. I think there's this cultural imbalance. People hear from pundits daily, but rarely from pastors outside the Sunday pulpit. And I think that podcasting can help reclaim that space for spiritual conversation. And podcasting doesn't have to have a big budget. You just need to do it your way, and you need to be consistent.
Man, we're definitely want to get into the tools here momentarily, but what brought to mind is, and you said you're having fun with it, and it's been edifying, it's been gratifying for you. And I know a lot of pastors, there's a bunch of different pastors, a lot of pastors have different preferences, but a lot of pastors have a significant teaching itch. Like they love to preach, they love to teach, they love to share. And being a pastor, you wear a lot of hats. And I know from working at a church, working with other church leaders and other pastors, that oftentimes they're spending a lot of time doing the business of the church, all the things that aren't preaching. And it's far from nothing to consider that if this is enriching for your soul, then it could make your whole week better and you can reach more people in the process. I think that's important to note. Yeah.
I've had so much fun. And I'll tell you my favorite episode. It came out like a month ago. For whatever reason, just researching this episode and writing this episode, maybe it's because I recorded an album when I was in high school. And so like I have this affinity for music and choirs or whatnot, but the episode was about the Comfort Choir. It was a church that opened its doors to a ministry of people that would come together, and they would go and they would travel and sing hymns at the bedsides of the lonely, of the bedsides of the sick, and people in the final hours of their life.
Wow!
And I thought that was such a powerful way to be the hands and feet of Jesus. It's a sermon, but it's a different. It's a different kind of sermon, right? I had so much fun. I've watched that video like 10 times, and not because I watched video like watching myself on video, because that's painful, but just the story itself moves me so much, and I just had so much fun doing it. I want to find more stories like that. So I'll say this: if your church, if you're listening to this, and your church has something that God did that was incredible in your church, it was a miracle. God came through on a building, or something happened, or maybe, pastor, you have a story that others have said is really inspiring. God did something in your life, or that there was something that happened that you think would encourage other ministry leaders. Please reach out to me. I would love to feature it.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure that we'll connect and make sure that the right contact is in the show notes, because that would be great for anybody listening that has some cool stories to share. So let's talk nuts and bolts here. So I know there's levels. There's everything from, a soundproof studio with all the bells and whistles to talking into your phone and uploading it to something free. So let's start with this. If a pastor or a church leader is like, yes, I get it, I want to start a podcast, like, where do they start? Like, what's the kind of the minimum viable plan or product to get up and running next week, let's say?
Honestly, I think the bar is really low as far as you can get in with $100. Yeah, everyone has a phone. What is that? What is that Adobe site? Is it podcast.adobe.com? Is that what it is? Podcast.adobe.com. I think that's it. Yeah. Yeah, you could use podcast.adobe.com. You can upload, or you can record on there, and their AI, you can literally record from your phone and upload it here, and it fixes it with AI, like any background noise, anything, just in the browser. And that's free. Like it's completely free. It's amazing. So my point is, like, there are a lot of tools out there that are free or really cheap that don't give you an excuse to say, oh, we don't have a big budget, because you don't really need a big budget. Remember, most of these viral clips, even podcast clips, the production value is not that high. I mean, sometimes they are. Sometimes you can definitely tell, like, these people are professional podcasters, but I don't think that you need that at a production value. You need good audio, and that's really about it.
Absolutely. So what does your workflow look like? What does your setup look like? Like, walk us through, you're preparing to record your next batch of 10 episodes. Like, how do you go from idea to talking points to script, if you script it, to capture? I know you got a team, but just walk us through your workflow for what it looks like for you.
Yeah. So for me, I'll say this. I was a manuscript preacher. So I'm a manuscript podcast writer. And for me, there's an app called Teleprompter.
Yes. Teleprompter.com.
Yeah. It's amazing. And I know pastors are really good at preaching on stage, but you get them in front of a camera and it's just like malfunction. My pastor's like that. Shout out Josh. Love you, bro. I love the teleprompter. I'm not a naturally gifted speaker. I mean, you could probably tell this already. Like, I just tend to mumble. I'm a little sporadic in my thought patterns. And so I really need that manuscripting to stay on focus. And so I use teleprompter, and it really helps. You can use shoot from your phone, but you can also put the iPad on like a teleprompter and shoot there, which is what I do when I record the episodes. So what I'll do is I use AI a lot of times to source episodes. So I've used ChatGPT, I use Grok, I use Claude, because they all kind of like will find different articles. And I'll say, hey, find me a story about a church doing something really unique and incredible, and don't do the homeless ministry or prisons, because I've gotten a lot of those. Like, there's a lot. It always wants to bring up like social work, which is awesome that churches are doing that. I love that. But just find me something a little bit more unique. Like a church in, was it Michigan? Their boiler went out. So they had to fundraise for a new boiler. So they started selling pies and doing all these different fundraisers. But what they got out of the fundraiser was far more than the money. The community that they built through that endeavor, was what really surprised the church and encouraged the church. And so, they were able to get a new boiler, but what they gained was like an increase in attendance, but also just a deeper connection between their people and the local businesses in the area. And so I thought, okay, that's great, right? I like that story. The Comfort Choir is another example. there's a story close to my home. My wife gave me this story. Our son Parker is autistic, our middle son. He's pretty high on the spectrum. He is 7 years old. He's nonverbal. He does not chew. We puree everything. And so autism kind of, is all encompassing in our life. And there is a church in Houston that has opened its doors to a ministry called Together at Mikey's Place. And they basically provide jobs for autistic and special needs people to come, and they make candles. And the church doesn't charge rent to this ministry, and they make candles at the church, and then they sell them. And then it's a way to provide some dignity and to give some of these people with special needs purpose and give them a job and responsibility. And so I thought, hey, this is a great example or episode for Ministry Minute. Duran Gray, who we just launched today, Pastor Duran Gray at Transformation Church in South Carolina, they've been paying off medical debt. So there is this company called Undo Medical Debt. I think it's a nonprofit. What they do is they buy large portfolios of medical debt for pennies on the dollar. And then a church or anybody really can say, hey, we'll give you $10,000 or $50,000. And I think it was $50,000 paid off $10 million of medical debt. And so people that have been getting collections letters can now get a letter from the church saying, we've paid off your medical debt. Like how incredible is that? Like the gospel at its core is like, hey, you've been forgiven. Like you have freedom in Christ. Like, your debt has been paid essentially. How wonderful is that? So, I use AI to find those types of stories. And then I use AI to help me write the script. Now I'll say this, there's a lot of massaging. There's a lot of massaging. You can't just like you can't download a copy of Craig Rochelle's sermon transcript and then try to preach it yourself and it'd be really good. You also can't just give AI a prompt and say, hey, write this episode and it's really good. I would say when it comes to these episodes, I'm tweaking a lot. I'm almost like editor in chief, not necessarily solo writer. And that's how I leverage AI there. And then what I'll do is I created a custom GPT. So once I have the script all written, then I have this GPT that writes the email for me to our email list. And I will say I got that dialed into like 95%. So it takes the script and it's a short and sweet email. And so I'm leveraging AI and a lot of the steps. I'm leveraging AI on the audio side. So leveraging AI a lot. But yeah, I'm just trying to source. At this point, I'm trying to source stories from other humans because I found those to be the most rich as far as like AI is finding articles online. And so it's, unless I'm able to get in contact with the organization or the church leader and they're willing to get on the phone or they want to sit down for an interview or they respond to an email, unless I get those like rich details that are in between the lines of the article, I'm really just going based off of what, the articles themselves reveal. So anytime I get a personal referral, that's just really, really great.
And what I'm hearing there is like what AI and what tools are they're making this thing possible in the sense that it would take you hours and hours and hours and hours and hours every week to just randomly Google search and try to find a needle in a haystack. Whereas, like obviously like you have a personal conversation with somebody, that's the ideal. But if you relied on that exclusively, you might not have a podcast. You definitely wouldn't be 28 episodes in. Right. So you're making something possible that is still good and it's still great and it's advancing the kingdom, but also like it might not be possible without using tools to make your job easier and faster.
Oh yeah.
What do you use to edit? So do you use a software to edit? And then is it audio only or is it video and audio?
It's video and audio. Now, I'm cheating on this side of things. I have a team that does the video editing for me. So I think he uses something called Fathom. You could use CapCut. I've used that before personally. That's pretty straightforward and easy. So on the video side of things, I have an editor. And that's been really, really, that's awesome to have.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be editing my own videos at this point. Or we wouldn't have a video podcast, I should say, if I didn't have an editor, because I just don't have time.
Absolutely. For any listeners that are thinking about editing tools and might not have a team, I know. Have you heard of the tool Descript, Justin?
Yes. Descript is really fun.
Yeah, Descript has made my life easier because my job, we manage social media accounts. I produce our senior pastor's podcast, and we have a professional video team. But if they're stacked up and super busy, or our pastor he records something outside of the studio, then I handle most of that. And so any listeners out there that have not tried or aren't familiar with Descript can make you look like a video editor even when you're not, and it does audio and all the things. What about mic? Obviously you got a nice mic there, but if somebody's thinking about microphone options, where should they start? What would you recommend there? Because you mentioned audio is in podcasting, video needs to be good enough, the audio needs to be clean, and AI can help with that, but a good mic is important.
I'm the wrong person to ask on the technical specs, but I can tell you. Okay, I'm not a technical person, so I'm the wrong person to ask, but I can tell you, and I'll have to look. I'll ask David on our team. We have this little mic that we use now that he bought on Amazon for $70, and it's a magnet, so it has a magnet on the back, and it just rests on your shirt. It's like the size of a coin.
Nice.
It's black. That records amazing audio, and it was $70. And right there. So again, I think you can get started for less than $100.
Absolutely. Where do you host your podcast? What tool do you use to distribute?
Oh man, we use Buzzsprout. We use
Buzzsprout.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think Buzzsprout distributes the podcast feed or the audio file to Apple, to Spotify, to wherever. And then it's a consolidated view of all of our downloads and listens that week. It is in Buzzsprout. And I think Buzzsprout's like $15 or $29 a month. Maybe it's a little bit more, but I think it's pretty approachable from like a budget standpoint.
Absolutely. So, kind of one more practical question, and then we'll kind of start wrapping up a little bit here. But you mentioned, I love your heart behind podcasts, because you said, like, this just brings me joy. I like telling stories. So there's a personal gratification there. But also, like, there's measurement, there's success, there's metrics. So either in your experience or as you've seen other pastors and church leaders do this well, like, how do you measure and define success? Or how would you recommend measuring and defining success for this, the time and effort that goes into podcasting?
I'll say this. I think the first measure of success when you're starting out is just consistency. Start small, be consistent. I think that is the number one goal. Don't worry about your metrics, worry about your episodes, and just be consistent. I haven't even looked at, I told myself I was going to give myself until episode 50 to really start critiquing and trying to like formulate the episodes in a way, or moments or clips in a way that has the potential to grow our reach and engage people more in this sort of like viral way. But I got to get to episode 50 first. So I'm just doing the work and being consistent, and I'm learning things. I'm observing things that I would like to change and tweak, once we get to episode 50. But that's what I've been trying to do. That's been my number one goal. And I would suggest that to anyone starting out. Start small, be consistent. The other thing I would say is focus on one clear goal for your podcast. Don't try to do everything at once. Just have one goal. My goal is to inspire and encourage ministry leaders in using a story. Like, that's my goal. And then I would say connection is more important than perfection starting out. So focus on trying to create content that is meaningful, that is thoughtful, that has the ability to connect with the listener, and focus more on that than on the perfect studio backdrop, or, the perfect viral clip. All those things will come in due time. But for me, the number one metric would be consistency.
I love that. You can't optimize something that doesn't exist, right?
Yeah, and I'll say this, it'll be tough. It'll be tough at first, right? Especially if you're not a podcaster and you're not used to doing that. It will be a little messy. But I'll say this, Matt. There are lessons to be learned in that messy, and we'll bookend it with this, right? I'll go back to the pastor that let me go 10 months into my ministry career. He actually gave me the book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. On the inside cover, he wrote a quote that just stuck with me. And I say it to other leaders, especially young leaders, all the time. But he said, what God wants to do through you, he must first do in you. And I think as you're working in a podcast, there will be lessons. It won't be clean. It won't be perfect. But God will be doing something in you so that he can do something through you as you get more experience, as you're consistent, as your reach and your audience grows. But it starts with that consistency.
That's beautiful. That is the perfect bookend to the episode. And to all the church leaders, ministry leaders listening, you have holy and hard work, and we are called to live out the Great Commission. And one of those worlds in 2025 is the digital world, and podcasting is an enormous opportunity. There's a ton of podcasts out there. Justin, I'm going to remember this one from earlier. You're talking about how there's more pastors than politicians, and yet why there's so many more political podcasts than there are pastors sharing the word, sharing their experience, sharing what God's putting on their hearts. And so, if anything, my hope and prayer is that this episode's a little bit of a clarion call. Like, we need more seeds that are being cast. We have I'm blanking on the exact scripture reference, but the harvest is plentiful and the laborers are few. Podcasting it's an enormous opportunity. And like Justin was saying, it doesn't take much to get started. And so we'll put all the show notes and the links to connect with Justin. If you got a story, send that to Justin, because he's got an awesome podcast that can feature the story. And also, remember what Justin said, just get started. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to be messy, just like building any new skill. But the important thing is, are you showing up, and are we, as the church overall, the capital C church, how can we put good content, put God-glorifying content out into the world so that more people can find and follow Jesus? So I hope that this episode encourages some people to get started with podcasting. Justin, any final words before we wrap up?
I'll say this, Matt. Every pastor has a voice worth hearing, whether it's theology, leadership, family, marriage, or stories from what God has done in your life or your congregation. There is room for your perspective and your voice. And I hope that more pastors launch a podcast in 2026.
Amen to that. So thanks for listening to another episode of Digital Media Church. Again, connect with Justin, follow Justin, check out his podcast, and we'll put everything that you need in the show notes. And until next episode, keep doing the good work.
Thanks, Matt.